I was in my home office, the soft hum of my computer filling the silence, when my mother-in-law burst through the front door and turned my world upside down. My name is Lisa, I'm 32, and for the past 5 years, I've been running a digital marketing agency from my laptop, quietly earning millions without anyone in my family knowing. That morning, to my husband's mom, I was just a lazy daughter-in-law, leeching off her son. By the end of the day, she'd thrown me out of my own house, and I was left figuring out how to put my life back together. Let me tell you how this all started. I've always been the organized type, the kind of person who plans everything. As a kid, I'd have my homework done before dinner and a savings account by 16. I met my husband, Parker, when we were both 24, working at a tech startup. Parker's a software engineer, steady and warm, with a laugh that makes you feel safe. We got married 3 years later, bought a cozy 3-bedroom house in a quiet suburb, and built a life that looked ordinary from the outside. But what nobody knew, except Parker, was that I'd started an online business on the side. My agency took off faster than I expected, and by 30, I was making 7 figures a year, all from my home office. Parker kept his job because he loved it, and I kept my success private because I liked our simple life. Parker's mom, my mother-in-law, is a different story. She's in her late 50s, a retired schoolteacher with a sharp tongue and a habit of measuring people by their work ethic. To her, a real job means leaving the house, dressing up, and punching a clock. She never got why I was always home, and when Parker tried to explain that I ran a business, she'd roll her eyes and say, "Typing on a computer isn't work." I didn't correct her. It didn't seem worth the fight, and I liked keeping my success under wraps. It felt safer. Then there's Parker's younger brother, Greg, who's 27 and the family favorite. Greg's charming, a bit of a dreamer, but always in some kind of mess. He's bounced between jobs, barista, delivery driver, aspiring musician, never sticking with anything long enough to make a living. My mother-in-law dotes on him, always bailing him out when he's short on rent or in debt. Parker and I have helped Greg too, lending him money here and there, but I noticed he wasn't great at paying it back. I let it slide to keep the peace, but that was my first mistake. The trouble started 6 months ago when my mother-in-law began dropping by unannounced more often. She'd show up with groceries or start folding laundry, saying she was helping, but it felt like she was spying on me. I'd be on a client call, and she'd walk in, making that disapproving tisk sound at the dishes in the sink or muttering about how the house looked neglected. I tried to stay polite, but it wore me down. Parker said to let it go, she was lonely since his dad passed a few years ago. So I smiled, made her coffee, and kept quiet. Then came the day everything fell apart. It was a Tuesday morning, and I was finalizing a 6-figure deal with a new client, my heart racing with excitement. Parker was at work, and I was alone when I heard the front door slam open. My mother-in-law's voice boomed through the house. "Lisa. We need to talk." I froze, my headset still on, the client still on the line. I muted myself, apologized, and ended the call early. When I walked into the living room, there she was, arms crossed, face red with anger. Greg stood behind her, hands in his pockets, looking uneasy. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to stay calm. She didn't hold back. "I'm done watching you mooch off my son. You sit around all day, doing nothing, while Parker works himself to death to pay for this house. You need to get out." I blinked, stunned. "This is my house too. I'm not going anywhere." "Don't give me that," she snapped. "You don't contribute a dime. Greg told me you're always on your computer, probably just shopping or playing games. Parker deserves better. Pack your things and go." I looked at Greg, who wouldn't meet my eyes. My stomach twisted. "Greg, what did you tell her?" He mumbled something about mentioning to his mom that I was always home and didn't seem to have a job. I realized Greg had been feeding her lies, or at least half-truths, to make himself look better. He'd probably been whining about his own money troubles, and I'd become the scapegoat. I tried to explain. "I run a business from home. I make more than enough to support this household. My mother-in-law laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. A business? If you were making money, you wouldn't be living like this. She waved her hand around the room, as if our comfortable, slightly messy house was a dump. The argument got worse from there. I told her she had no right to barge in and make demands. She called me a liar and a leech. Greg just stood there, letting his mom tear into me. Finally, she pointed at the door and said, "If you don't leave, I'll make sure Parker sees you for who you really are." I don't know why I walked out, maybe I was too shocked, or maybe I just needed to breathe, but I grabbed my laptop, phone, and jacket, and left. I drove to a coffee shop a few miles away, my hands shaking on the wheel. I felt humiliated, betrayed, and like I'd lost my own home. The weight of that moment in the coffee shop hit me harder than I expected. I sat there, staring at my laptop screen, the cursor blinking on an email I couldn't bring myself to send. All I could think about was how I'd spent years building this life, our home, my business, my marriage, only to have it questioned by someone who didn't even know me. I felt like I was back in high school, when my mom would tell me I'd never amount to anything if I didn't follow her exact path. I'd proved her wrong by building my agency, but now, facing my mother-in-law's judgment, that old insecurity crept back. I took a sip of my coffee, cold now, and promised myself I wouldn't let her take away everything I'd worked for. I thought about the first time I met my mother-in-law, at a family barbecue a month after Parker and I got engaged. She'd been warm at first, offering me a plate of her famous potato salad, but I caught her watching me later, her eyes narrowing as I laughed with Parker's cousins. When I offered to help clean up, she waved me off, saying, "Oh, don't bother, you're not family yet." It was a small jab, but it stuck with me. Over the years, those little comments piled up, her insisting I'd settle down once I had kids, her hinting that Parker could have married someone more traditional. I'd brushed it off to keep the peace, but now I saw it clearly, she'd never accepted me as part of her family, and this was her chance to push me out. That's when the problems piled up. While I was at the coffee shop, trying to focus on work, I got a text from Parker. His mom had called him at work, crying, saying I'd screamed at her and Greg and stormed out. She told him I'd admitted to wasting time at home and not contributing to our marriage. Parker was confused, asking me what happened. I tried to call, but he was in a meeting. I texted back, explaining my side, but I could tell he was stuck in the middle, torn between his mom and me. Then there was Greg's mess. I later found out he'd borrowed $5,000 from us a few months ago to cover his rent, and he hadn't paid back a cent. Worse, he'd been telling his mom that I was the one mishandling money, implying I was spending Parker's paycheck on frivolous things. It was a lie, but it fed her narrative about me being a deadbeat. Greg's financial troubles were becoming my problem, and I hadn't seen it coming. I spent the day at the coffee shop, working on my laptop, trying to keep my clients happy while my life unraveled. By evening, Parker called, his voice tight. "Lisa, what's going on? Mom says you attacked her, and Greg's backing her up. I know that's not you, but I need to hear your side." I told him everything, how his mom threw me out, how Greg lied to cover his own tracks, how I'd kept my business a secret to avoid changing family dynamics. Parker was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Why didn't you tell me how bad it was with Mom? And why hide your business? She thinks you're unemployed." "I didn't think I had to prove myself to her," I said, my voice breaking. "I thought you and I were enough." He sighed. "Come home. We'll figure this out together." But going home wasn't easy. When I got back, my mother-in-law was still there, sitting on the couch like she owned the place. She'd convinced Parker to let her stay until things were sorted. I felt like a stranger in my own house. Over the next few days, the tension was suffocating. She'd make snide remarks about my so-called business, and Greg kept showing up, acting like nothing happened. I realized this wasn't just a misunderstanding, it was about control. My mother-in-law wanted to be the one calling the shots in our marriage, and Greg was using her to dodge his own failures. I knew I had to take back my life, but I didn't want to sink to their level. Yelling or getting petty wouldn't fix this. So I came up with a plan, one that would expose the truth, protect my marriage, and make sure this never happened again. First, I sat Parker down at the kitchen table, my laptop open in front of us. My hands were shaking, not from nerves but from the weight of finally letting him in. I need you to see this, I said, pulling up the financials for my business. This is what I've been working on all these years. He leaned forward, his brow furrowed, as I clicked through the bank statements and client contracts. These were deals that brought in more in a month than most people see in a year. His eyes widened, flicking from the screen to me and back again. Lisa, how did you do this? He asked, his voice low, like he was seeing me for the first time. I started small, I said, just a side hustle. But it grew, Parker. It grew into something bigger than I ever planned. I showed him a spreadsheet, rows of numbers that told the story of late nights and early mornings, of clients who trusted me to build their brands. His fingers hovered over the screen, tracing a line that showed a quarterly revenue most people would dream of. Why didn't you tell me it was this big? He asked, his voice catching. There was hurt there, but also pride, and it made my chest ache. I didn't want it to change us, I admitted. I liked our life, our house, our routines. I thought keeping it quiet would keep things simple. I paused, swallowing hard. But I should have told you. I should have trusted you with it. He nodded, his hand finding mine. You're incredible, you know that, he said, and the way he looked at me made me feel like I was finally home again. I told him my plan, and he agreed to back me up. Next, I dealt with Greg. I called him and asked to meet at a diner near his apartment. When he showed up, looking smug, I got straight to the point. Greg, I know you've been lying to your mom about me. And I know you owe us $5,000. Here's the deal, you're going to tell her the truth about what you said, and you're going to start paying us back. If you don't, I'll make sure everyone in the family knows how you've been playing us. Greg's face went pale. You can't prove anything. I can, I said. I have texts, bank records, and a memory of every time you've asked us for money. And I'm guessing you don't want Mom finding out you've been lying to her too. He squirmed but agreed. A few days later, he told his mom he'd exaggerated about me to make himself look better. It wasn't a full apology, but it was enough to shake her story. The final step was my mother-in-law. I didn't want to humiliate her, but she needed to know the truth. I invited her over for dinner, just the three of us, me, Parker, and her. I made her favorite lasagna, keeping the mood light at first. After dessert, I took a deep breath and slid the folder across the table, the lasagna still warm in the air between us. What's this? She asked, her voice sharp, like she was ready to dismiss whatever I had to say. Proof, I said, keeping my tone steady. Proof that I'm not who you think I am. She opened the folder, her fingers hesitating as she flipped through the pages. I watched her eyes scan the revenue charts, the kind of numbers that made her coffee cup freeze halfway to her mouth. There was a client contract on top, one I'd closed last month for $500,000. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. I leaned forward, my voice calm but firm. Last year, my business brought in over $2 million. I've been supporting this house, and I've been doing it from that desk you think I'm just playing games at. Her face went pale, the kind of pale you'd see if someone had just unraveled their whole worldview. She flipped another page, then another, her hands trembling slightly. The room was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking in the kitchen. Parker reached for my hand under the table, his grip tight, like he was anchoring me. I didn't tell you because I didn't want it to change how you saw me, I continued, softer now. But you need to know I'm not freeloading. I love your son, and I'm not going anywhere. She closed the folder, her jaw tight, and stared at the table. For the first time since I'd known her, she didn't have a comeback. She just nodded, stood up, and left without another word. Parker squeezed my hand again, and I felt the weight of the last few weeks lift, just a little. Over the next few weeks, things started to change. My mother-in-law stopped dropping by unannounced, and when she did visit, she was quieter, less critical. Greg began making small payments to us, though I doubted he'd ever fully repay the debt. Parker and I had tough talks about trust and communication, and we started seeing a counselor to work through the strain this put on our marriage. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. By the time a month passed, I felt like I'd reclaimed my home and my life. My business was still growing, and I'd hired a part-time assistant to handle the workload. Parker and I were stronger than ever, and I'd learned to be more open about my success, even with his family. My mother-in-law never apologized outright, but she started asking about my work, and I could tell she was trying to understand. Looking back, I see this whole ordeal taught me something big. Holding on to anger is like carrying a weight you don't need. I could have stayed mad at my mother-in-law and Greg, but letting go, while standing up for myself, gave me peace. It was hard, but it made me tougher. So, here's where I am now. I'm back in my home, my business is thriving, and my marriage is solid. But I keep wondering, did I handle this the right way? Should I have confronted my mother-in-law earlier or been upfront about my success from the start? If you were me, what would you have done? I'd love to hear your thoughts, because even now, I'm still learning how to balance family, truth, and forgiveness.
Appreciate you watching. Give it a like, hit subscribe, and catch more drama next time.